having a bit of tea, cleaning some wounds, and I just got to thinking about how hard it is to relate to people, typically speaking. Not always, but more often than not. Everyone, anybody you bump into is so swept up. I guess that lends itself to what I was kicking around. Everyone's so swept up with the societal goings on, and they don't realize that this is a stream, it's a current, it's all those other analogies, and it's a channel of manipulation. How many fucking water analogies just poured out of me? The puns, wow, yeah, it's funny how that works. But most people don't realize this. They're not. I constantly complain people aren't willing to color outside the lines because they don't realize that they can. And if they don't, nothing's ever going to change for the better, because you and I are being herded. That's what all these, social engineering trends, societal trends. And there's a hierarchy to it. It's a tiered system in a number of ways that keeps you. It's a system of control through and fucking through. And the point's not to play along with it. The point's not to participate. And if most people realized that it was a joke, they wouldn't. If they realized that it was more harmful than good, they wouldn't. But again, people don't realize they can color outside the goddamn lines. There's so much more I want to say to this, but this is also just superficial, fucking boring ass dog shit to me. This is ridiculous. It's fucking ridiculous. And I'm just shaking my head because it frustrates me to no end trying to reach people. And some of them will tell me that they're interested in this, or they see that, or, oh, I could believe that. I'm not asking you to believe a fucking thing. In fact, anything that's firmly rooted in a belief system is part of this problem. And if that's the mindset that you have going into any situation, you're going to be that much more susceptible to my many water analogies having to do with a current or a stream or a channel or of societal goings on. All of which is, again, it's fixed in social engineering agendas. And these are the trends that people believe in. They repeat. They swear by. They'll argue with you about. Because that's what they think they know. I often say anything that's well-financed and well-circulated can't be trusted. Apply that to anything you've probably ever heard. Because the reason you know about it is because it was widely circulated and well-financed. You hear some people say, oh yeah, everything's a fucking lie. We've been lied to, blah, blah, blah. A lot of times I'll say we've been had, because we have been. But they don't consider the fact that they have multiple strings attached to them and they're all being pulled. They'll say these things, but they don't apply what they're supposedly thinking about to what they're experiencing. What came before, what they're doing now, and what they're most likely going to do down the line. In other words, A, B, and C, they're reaffirming the official narrative or the societal, tactics of manipulation. This is how it works. And it works really fucking well. One of the analogies that I used to rattle off, and this has to do with, it was a poor choice on my behalf, but I have a bunch of psychology and sociology crap under my belt or in my past. And one of the things that they used to echo in a lot of these bullshit courses had to do with, and this does hold water, this is how our masters manipulate people, typically speaking. It's also why some people, ideally speaking, you'll see this written into books and other crap having to do with, secret agents who have no ties. Or you'll hear this echoed in terms of superhero stuff, where take Peter Parker, he loves Mary Jane, one of the love interests, or he has Aunt May, or he loses Uncle Ben. Those are the ties. And if he didn't have any of that, he might have been very different, in other words. His actions are based on the fact that he has a moral compass and he cares about these people. So one of the analogies often rattled off has to do with why you don't harm other people, or why you don't speak out of turn, or why you aren't rude to people, or why you don't do certain things. And it's because as a community, if you did that, what would happen is social shaming, typically speaking. Say you murdered somebody, people would gang up on your mom and or your dad or your whoever raised you, if you need to apply it to your life. And they would make them feel bad. They would persecute them because you did something wrong. So that keeps you in line. Now, if you apply that mindset, our masters understand this is how shit works. And so this is still applied in terms of how people conduct themselves and what keeps people, walking in lockstep. This bleeds into polarizing positive vibes only and echoing, chanting a fucking mantra, chanting a fucking message, which is in place to polarize you. And in this case, any act of polarization is a problem. And that's another story for another fucking day. The ancients taught us about this, and people, for the most part, have largely forgotten it and or dismissed it. And what we see happening these days is a reflection of that. And it's not a good thing. So obviously we're doing something wrong as a people, as a whole. The majority, at least, more often than not. And if we weren't, then things would be harmonious. Things would be abundant. Things would be, looking up. But they're not. I also constantly complain about, maybe I just lost part of that other track, but I complain about this often, and people will talk about it again. The fluoride stare, and they're poisoning our food and our air and stuff. We're being chemtrailed, and that shit is true, but they don't think about whether or not that has affected how they conduct themselves in society. This also lends itself to what I complained about having to do with emojis, truncating your words, speaking in fucking abbreviations. Essentially speaking, it's a new version of eubonics, but it's widespread, and it's a war on words. But people are lowering themselves, and they don't realize that people have been dumbed down, despite these things that people will rattle off. You'll see people who won't spell their fucking words talking about chemtrails and fluoride and all this other garbage, but they're not trying to rise to the occasion. They're truly not trying to raise their vibration. They're lowering themselves because of the societal current crap that I was already highlighting. This is just one example. You could consider, actually sit with yourself, think about how you act, think about how you interact with people, and think about why the fuck you do any of this. Are you doing it because it's modeled after what you idolize, or modeled after something that you were trained to do? Most likely both, to varying degrees. Is it what you see everybody else doing, even though you're supposedly an individual? Most people are trying to, supposedly stand out, and yet what you see are people quite literally saying the same things, dressing the same way, acting largely in the same manner, again and again and again. Carbon copies of carbon copies, for the most part. Maybe you'll think about some of the things that I said if you see this video. Maybe you won't. At the end of the day, you fucking decide. Do you want things to get better, or do you want things to just stay on course? What the fuck do I know?